Hello again. Thanks to everyone who's joining our call, which is looking at Gradescope and looking at how we can create that level of feedback. Yeah, we do have 100 people now on the call, and we're looking at feedback consistency and timely feedback with Gradescope today. Today on the call, we have Karen Avnit, who is Associate Professor for Singapore Institute of Technology, and Matt Dykey and Maggie from Melbourne University, who will also be presenting on the experience with Gradescope for today's session. As it is customary for us in Australia, I would like to acknowledge the elders, both past, present, and emerging. I'm currently located in Melbourne, Australia, and I'm acknowledging the Wurundjeri people on the land on which I am currently sitting and for which Turnitin is also based in Melbourne. I acknowledge all the elders for whatever regions we're all connecting today and thanking them for an opportunity to be on the call today. A little bit of housekeeping, like I said earlier, the Q&A is where you can post your questions. And the way the session will run today is that we're gonna have our presenters present somewhere between 20 to 25 minutes each, and we'll give some time for people to ask questions and we can respond to questions. Feel free to put all your conversations, introduce yourself, tell us about your experience with Gradescope, what you like about it in the chat forum. And I'm going to hand over to Karen now. I'm going to stop sharing so Karen can share her screen. Over to you, Karen.
Thank you. Okay, so I think I'm sharing my screen.
Yes, you are.
Great. So hi, everyone. Thank you for this wonderful opportunity to present about the way that I use Gradescope in the way that I teach. As mentioned, my name is Corinne. I came across Gradescope maybe 2 years ago, and I became an instant fan of this tool. So it's really a pleasure for me to share, but also to learn from others how we make the most out of this tool, how to make our lives easier, and at the same time improve the learning experience for our students. I noticed in the comments that not everyone has used Gradescope before, so I'll say a few words about this. From what I know, Gradescope started as a tool for online marking of paper-based assignments to allow faculty, teaching instructors to scan papers and easily manage the marking online. But since then, it branched into a lot of different types of assessments. So it has complete online assessments, it has programming assessments as well. And it does MCQs and such in a very efficient way. It uses AI to assist us a bit in clustering similar answers by students and so on. So lots of features, and for those of us that follow their development lines, there's always new features coming out and in beta and allowing us to try them out, so it's really exciting. For the presentation today, I'll explain a bit about where I come from, but then I'll go mostly into a module that I teach about mathematics and statistics for ICT and the different ways in which I use the tool in this module. So SIT, Singapore Institute of Technology, it's a relatively new public university in Singapore. We position ourselves to be the University of Applied Learning. So we put a lot of focus on industry-ready graduates, which means we have to go through a lot of hands-on assignments, a lot of practice work, a lot of collaborations with the industry for our students. The image that you see here is an illustration of our planned campus in Punggol. That will be available in, I don't know, 2-3 years. So maybe in 3 years, my office will be somewhere around here. I'm hoping for this window. I don't know, who knows? Okay. As for myself, I'm a faculty member and I teach in the cluster for Infocom Technology. I teach modules that are related to software engineering. I also hold an appointment with our co-lead, the Center for Learning Environment and Assessment Development. It's basically our teaching and learning unit. And over there, I'm in charge of technology enhanced learning. So I get to play with a lot of technological tools for teaching. So with this, it's time to talk about ICT 1005. It's a mathematics module that is taught for the first year students when they first step into the university. The size of the cohort is constantly growing from one year to another, and that means that we need to get more and more creative with the learning activities that we offer to students, just to keep the teaching load manageable. There's usually 4 or 5 faculty members teaching together in this course, and that's also represents sometimes a challenge on its own, just how to keep everyone doing the same thing and being consistent in how we provide feedback to students, for example. And with this being a module of mathematics that most students are genuinely afraid of, we put a lot of emphasis on providing as many opportunities for students to get their own hands dirty and try to solve exercises on their own. And we hardly ever provide any solutions. Instead, what we provide is always feedback on what the students are doing. So if a student wants to come and ask me about a specific exercise, they know they need to come with their own working to show me what it is that they've tried to do. And we take the discussion based on what they are doing and what that means about what they understand and what they may need to look into. This is what a typical week looks like in the module, where the bottom activities here are what we used to call classroom activities, but perhaps the more appropriate term these days is synchronous sessions, basically time in which me and the students are in the same either physical or cyberspace. And the part at the top here is activities that we expect students to do on their own. So we'll zoom into each one of those a bit to see what this means. We start each topic with what we call an interactive lecture. So this is mostly explaining what the topic is about, having intuition-based exercises with them, using student response systems for them to try things out and get immediate feedback on whether they're in the right direction or not. And I put these recycling icons here to indicate places where students get feedback on what they are doing. The whole point of the first introductory lecture is just to get students interested, hopefully to get them excited enough about this so that they do the self-learning, which we send them to do later on their own. That's usually made of a few interactive videos where they are asked questions and need to provide answers and see if they're correct or incorrect. And they learn basically all the terminology and the basic ideas of the topic on their own. And what we want is for them to come to the next lecture after they've already reached a certain level of understanding of the topic. And so to help them be a bit disciplined about this and not have them show up to the lecture without knowing what was going on, we provide them with a readiness assurance test just before the lecture. So this kind of motivates them to actually go through the self-learning. And this is the first time that they find themselves going on Gradescope for the weekly activities. So the readiness assurance test is done online on Gradescope. It's a 10-minute MCQ, very basic, just to make sure that they've gone through the topics, that they know what this is about. They're not going to come to class clueless about this. Sorry. And what you see here is the settings that I use for these tests. You can see here that the students have a window of 2 hours in this case to get into the system, even though the test is only for 10 minutes. So we're a bit flexible on that. It's in the evening. They may have different things to do. They just need to find the 10 minutes to go through this test and make sure that they complete it. Now, because of this arrangement, we don't want to give them immediate feedback on what they're doing on the system, although this is possible in terms of the Gradescope settings. Instead, what we do is we wait for the session to close for everyone, and then we use the integration with the LMS, the learning management system, to give them both their grades, to give them a badge that indicates how well they're doing. So you see here from 1 week to the next, they understand the meaning of the different rats that you see here to indicate if they're doing well or they need to do better for next week or not. And we use the statistics information that Gradescope provides to immediately tell them, okay, you know how you're doing. This also allows you to see how it works relative to the other students in the class, because maybe you got 3 out of 5 and you're happy with it, but actually the average is 3.5. So maybe you'd want to put more effort. And also provide them some insights as to what was going on in these questions so that they can immediately think whether that was, they were heading in the right direction, they were thinking about it in the right way or not. So this is the readiness assurance test. After that, of course, they come to the interactive lecture, and we go deeper into the topic. We know everybody already covered the basics, so we can have more meaningful discussions. We can address any issues that the students are raising, any difficulties that they encountered, and so on. When we're done with that, just showing where we are in the sequence here, the next thing for them to do is start preparing for the tutorial. So the tutorial is going to take place here, but between the lecture and the tutorial, we want them to go through the exercises of the tutorial and try them out on their own. So I don't know what these things look like at your end, but my experience with such requests from students, please go over the tutorial exercises before you come to class, are usually not well received. And I experience that students come to class even though they did not even have a look at the tutorial exercises, but sometimes they don't even remember what the lecture was about. And then we end up wasting a lot of the tutorial session time on the very basic things rather than go into the more interesting exercises that I wanted everyone to go through. So to encourage everyone to complete the tutorial exercises, we ask them to submit the tutorial exercises before they come to class. Now, this may sound a bit crazy because we don't actually expect them to know how to solve these exercises. This is exactly what we will cover in the tutorial. So we make it very easy for them. They work in small teams so that if you get stuck on one exercise, you have no idea where to go, someone from your team likely knows something or can try something different from what you had in mind about that exercise. It's also very low stake in terms of the weight for the final grade. Sometimes it's even just only for bonus marks. And the submissions is done on Gradescope. It's done the day before the tutorial. So that allows me as the instructor to come to class after I've had a quick look at what the students are doing. I understand what concept they know well and also what concept they could use some more instruction on. And at that stage, it's really just for me to have, it really takes 10 minutes before I come to class to see what the class is doing. And then it helps the session be much more customized to the students' needs. At that stage, I don't yet use the rubrics for grading. I'll do that after the tutorial. In fact, I'll do it during the tutorial while they're working on other exercises. And they'll get to see later on exactly how well that was done. The next thing is they come into the tutorial and they go through the same exercises that they were supposed to try before they came to the tutorial. Now, remember that the way that I teach, I don't show them solutions. So what I do is I give them time to work through within their team what they want to submit as the answer to a specific exercise. And I rely on these submissions to drive the discussion in the tutorial. So the schedule in the tutorial looks pretty much like this. I give them 10, 15 minutes to work on exercises. They go one after the other. These are the same exercises that they were supposed to work on before they came to the tutorial, but this time possibly with more insight and a bit more inspiration because we're sitting together and they can ask questions and learn from what we've just discussed on the previous exercises and so on. And then they submit the work on Gradescope, and live in the classroom, we start discussing these exercises with them. So 10, 15 minutes of work and then 30 minutes of discussion of what they were doing. So let me show you what that looks like, if I can lose the laser. Okay. So this is from a real session. What you see here is the Gradescope markers view, basically. And what you see here is that some students submitted their exercises. Now, the beautiful thing about the way that Gradescope assignments work is that it's very easy for the students to either take a photo and upload it as their solution, or take a screenshot from their laptop and submit that as the solution, or submit a PDF that they have on their laptop. Of course, during the tutorial session, Some use pen and paper, and as you'll see here, let me just go to a next submission. A different team submitted something that looks slightly different. Another team submitted something that they wrote using Microsoft Word. And you can see that, first of all, it's kind of anonymous. I mean, I know where to find the name of the students that submitted this, but we don't have to know who they are. So it's very easy in the classroom to ask students to give feedback about this submission, what they think can be improved about this, what they like about this, how clear they feel that it is. And we really can focus the entire discussion based on what students are doing and how they evaluate what they are doing. Of course, also how I evaluate what they are doing, and that's the part that they are looking for. For those that are not familiar with Gradescope, later on when I'll go to grade this, all I'll need to do is decide if this is correct. I'll just click on this and that was kind of graded, or if this was kind of in the right direction, or if this was incorrect, and that's basically all I need to do for the grading. You don't see here points being updated because of the specific settings that I had for this, but that's sort of beside the point. So this is these are the activities that we do week to week within the class, and students get to know this and they get used to it. They understand how this is going to work. They know they have these 10-minute MCQs at the evening, and they know they need to submit their work in Teams, and they know how to sit in the tutorial session and upload their exercises so that we can discuss. Now, to be honest, in the first tutorial session, hardly anyone wants to submit anything, but once they realize that when they submit something, we show it to the class and we get to discuss it, it means they get a lot of feedback on what they were doing. And so for the second session, I already have everyone submitting what they done, and it makes for very meaningful discussions. So this is for the weekly activities. And now for the painful part. We have 4 tests and 1 final exam in this module. And you may recall that I mentioned we have over 200 students. So that means a lot of marking. And so before the days of Gradescope, this is what marking used to look like. A bunch of us sitting in a room. We look like we're smiling and we're happy, but this is basically laughter out of despair. Piles of scripts, a lot of logistics. We need to get the scripts from our administrators. We need to make sure that we don't lose these scripts. We're sitting together because each one of us is trying to grade 1 question. And so I cannot just take all the script to myself. I need to spread them around the different instructors, and it becomes sort of a logistical nightmare. So it's easier if we're just sitting together in the same room for a couple of days, which is very painful. And who has a couple of days to do nothing but marking anyway? And there's lots of delays that are associated with this. We decided that because of the way that we mark, and this is of course all the pre-Gradescope days, right? When we had to mark physical scripts, you see here the red pens and such. We had to go through every script at least twice, sometimes more than that. And I mentioned here backwards correction. Sometimes after 100 scripts, you recognize, actually, I want to mark this question differently based on what the students were doing. So it means going back to the start and correcting the way that we're marking a question. And I think we're all familiar with how painful marking can be. But this was before Gradescope. Now that we have Gradescope, I don't even have an image of us doing this because everyone's at their home on their laptop. We're all marking in parallel. I don't really care what the others are doing. I'm marking my own question. They don't rely on the pace in which I'm marking my question. I don't rely on what they are doing in that sense. Even if I need to share a question with another colleague, we are using the same rubric. So there's no way that we're marking this differently. We don't have a way to use a different rubric for it. We're both looking at the same screen that has the same rubric on it. And so that makes things much better. Now, in terms of the interface itself, I was thinking when at the start we were asked to say what it is that we like about Gradescope. I really love the user interface in the way that when you mark a question, all you get to see is that question. You don't, as long as you don't move your face from the screen, you're constantly looking at that question across different scripts, and that keeps you really focused on what you're doing. It helps you stay very consistent, and it really saves a lot of time. That you don't need to flip through and look for where the student wrote that answer. Did they even answer that question, and so on. Very easy alignment of standards, again, because we're all using the same rubrics. And also what I wrote here about complete transparency is that at any point in time, I can have a look at what all the other instructors are doing. So for myself, as the person in charge of the module, it's very important for me to make sure that everyone's doing what I think they should be doing. But because it's all online, it's very easy to just go in there and see that. In terms of what I just mentioned previously about backwards marking, right? If at some point in time you realize you want to mark a question differently. It happened to me last year when in an exam, I saw an answer from a student that I couldn't even understand how that relates to the question. And I dismissed it. I said, okay, this is incorrect, gave them 0 marks and moved on. And about 50 scripts later, I saw something that looked quite similar to that. I still didn't understand why they were writing this as an answer to that question. And I dismissed it and gave them a 0 and moved on. And around script 117, I saw that answer again. And I started thinking, okay, if 3 different students thought this is something reasonable to write for this question, I need to think why they're doing that. And I gave it some thought and I kind of realized, you know what? It's not correct. That's not what I was expecting, but it does show some level of understanding about this content. So I want to give them partial marks. Now, in the manual version of this is a nightmare. It means now it will take me probably 2 hours to find those scripts where students specifically answer that question that way and change the marking there. But on Gradescope, all I need to do is use the arrow button to go backwards. It takes me to all the previous scripts on the exact same question. And it literally took me less than 2 minutes to fix this for everyone. I just need to find that script and give it the right rubric item. So that was to me the eureka moment that I said, okay, I have to have everyone using Gradescope in SIT because this is a real time saver. So since then, I started convincing more and more people at SIT to use Gradescope. And we ran a survey with a few of them. I have to say I did not get a lot of responses, but I did get 24 participants to tell us what they think. And in terms of questions such, do you agree, disagree, strongly disagree, and so on, I asked them, does it make grading more convenient? And 96%, meaning 23 out of 24 people, said agree or strongly agree. Does it improve consistency and reliability in marking? We have 23 out of 24 say agree or strongly agree. And about communication between markers, remember now we're not marking in the same room anymore, and yet we can see what everyone else is doing. We have 73% of faculty saying agree or strongly agree. So I consider the move to marking our exams specifically with Gradescope to be a huge success, both in terms of saving time, which is of course precious, but really about consistency and reliability of what we do for our students. And of course, all the other types of marking, the other type of assessments, the online assessment and such, it's really nice to interact with the students that way and give them learning activities that they can find to be meaningful. So that's all that I wanted to share today, and I'm looking forward to any questions or any sharings from your end about how you're using the tool.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to turn on my camera. Thank you, Karen, for this well-detailed presentation on how Gradescope is supporting timely feedback and grading consistency. I actually do love the fact that you mentioned you did some stats to get some feedback from the instructor. So it's not just your word or our words against whoever. You've actually been able to do that. So that actually gives us some feedback that we're doing something right. There are questions for you, but I think we should just park the questions until after all the presentations. So we're just going to hand over to Matt and Maggie to do their presentation.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Listening to Karen then, I'm not actually sure why I'm even here, because I agree with pretty much everything she said. In fact, was actually having a side conversation with Maggie during Karen's presentation. We're going, oh, that's actually something we could do ourselves. Anyway, I'm still here to talk, so I might as well share the Melbourne University experience. So like Kieran, going to talk about much the same thing in a slightly different order. So we're going to talk about how University of Melbourne used to mark and grade papers before Gradescope, and really focusing on how does Gradescope make our life easier. We've already decided that we want to make sure that even when we return to more on-campus teaching and more on-campus exams, we keep using Gradescope because it actually does save us a significant amount of time and is a much smarter way to do it. And now I'm going to hand across to Maggie, who's going to give you some of the different examples Melbourne's using, not just our examples from accounting, but some from across the university, how we manage student feedback and just general experience from students and ourselves using the statistics. So moving on to Melbourne. We are a large institution and mainly paper-based exam. And when I mean large, we kind of do redefine what large means. Our largest subject this semester across the university, which wasn't using Gradescope, was 2,200 students sitting exam. The biggest subject I dealt with this semester had just under 1,600 students, and we did use Gradescope in that subject. So we are talking very large subjects. So when things are paper-based, I used that to coordinate the subject was 1,600. That's a lot of paper that used to be shuffled around between markers, put into large bundles of 20 to 50. We had up to 14 markers marking the exam paper, sometimes even more. So as Kieran said, if you made a mistake in your marking, you had to go back. That was a lot you had to go back over. And like Kieran, we used to be on site together, marking it jointly, but just with 1,600 bundles of paper or 1,600 exam papers, that was a lot of paper shuffling, but it was also a lot of time wasted in just literally picking up the paper, finding the question you're marking, putting the paper down, picking up the next one. I think I've actually saved hours in the last marking period just by not actually shuffling paper around. So that's where we were, and I don't want to go back. I'll be absolutely frank, I do not want to go back. The reason I don't want to go back is this idea of using Gradescope. It ensures marking consistency. I noticed one of the questions being asked was, if you only got one marker marking the question, don't you have consistency anyway? Well, when you're marking the same question 1,600 times, or in my subject that I'm currently teaching Maggie 500 times, you're marking that same question for days on end. So you're not necessarily consistent with yourself across that time frame because you try to keep in mind your memory, what your marking guide is, what your marking rubric is. You kind of do change your mind as you go along. But what I'm finding with Gradescope is, one, it's faster, so it's easier for me to be consistent. Two, having that rubric on the screen all the time, as Kieran showed, makes it much easier for us to be consistent because we don't actually misremember the rubric anytime. We've always got it referred to. And as Kieran also highlighted, when there is an adjustment in grades, it's so much easier. Even if you want to actually change your mark allocation, go, hang on a sec, I've got probably too many marks for this point, not enough marks for that point. You can adjust that mark allocation then there, and it goes back and redoes everything easily. We don't make the calculation errors. We don't actually make any errors in reading handwriting. Is that a 4 or 9 from my markers? Got a bad story about that. And because it is online marking, as Kieran said, you've got multiple markers marking the same paper. Again, with the large number of students we deal with, we will often have multiple markers at the same time. So it just saves all that time waiting for someone else to finish that bundle so you can mark it. As Kieran also said, it makes grading quite easy. Doesn't really matter whether you want to grade question by question or paper by paper. Gradescope can make it easy both ways, just with shortcut keys to go to the next question. So that's that real easy navigation. And we will show you an example later on just how quick and easy the AI marking can be, where we can literally mark 849 papers with a click of a button. There's a bit more to set up the AI, but once the AI is set up, marking literally takes minutes. And Gradescope's also got around a lot of the issues we've had with these large classes with mathematical symbols. But we've also found examples, which Maggie will highlight in a sec, around foreign languages, as in even music, using this ability of Gradescope with the AI to pattern match. So I'm going to hand across to Maggie to show you some examples.
So, thank you, Matt. In terms of the assessment, as Matt previously mentioned, when Gradescope was first used within our institution, it was initially used by the mathematics subjects. And however, when we moved online, other subjects, including foreign languages and music subject, particularly music notations, are also finding Gradescope to be beneficial for their assessment, whether that's an exam or just general assignment. In particular, in terms of foreign language, subjects that uses character, for instance, Chinese, Korean, Japanese, the AI sort of grouping that Gradescope has allows answers to be grouped together, which enables for a more effective and efficient marking. Gradescope is also used in many STEM subjects and other quantitative subjects as well. And a lot of other subjects also use it for just purely written assignment. So no mathematical symbol, no characters, but just purely written, for instance, an essay or a longer type of answer. Next slide, please, Matt. So this is an example of one way we've used Gradescope, and this is actually the way we use Gradescope in the subject that Matt and I teaches. This is one of our exam paper. On the left side of the page, you will see that this is what the students see. So this is the online assignment format of Gradescope, where students are able to type in their answer directly into the given box. And with this particular box, it actually adjusts the size depending on the student's answer, and the adjustments happen automatically. On the right side of the page, top right, you will see that that's the rubric. So this is what we see as we were marking through the exam. And at the bottom right of the page, that's what the students would see when they're reviewing the exam. So there's like a breakdown of all the different marks within each of the sub-questions and the questions. So how does this compare to more of the paper-based? So particularly in our subject, we made very minimal changes in terms of our exam. So questions are largely the same. So on the left side of the page, you will see that that's the Gradescope version, while on the right side of the page, that's just like a Word document version of our previous written exam. The only change you will notice there is that the multiple choice questions, we did not use that within Gradescope. In saying that, Gradescope does have a multiple choice option in the online assignment. It's just that within our faculty, there is a rule that unless we have a pool of questions that allow us to randomize these multiple choice questions, we were told to minimize the use of these questions. So we just changed that into more of a short answer type of question, which essentially assesses the same thing as well. This is the exam quiz format or the homework format. Essentially, this is a student upload question. This is from one of our physics subject within the university. So students are able to upload their answers. So as we can see on the screen here, their written answer, and take a picture of that and upload it straight into the question. So within Gradescope, there's actually two options that the students could do this. They could either upload the entire paper based on a particular template, or even in the online assignment format that I previously spoke about. Within that format, you can actually select a question that, rather than having sort of a free entry text box, you could actually have a button for students to upload just a snippet of a particular answer. So you could have quite a variety of different type of ways that students could upload or submit their answers for each question. In this next one, this is the subject Matt was mentioning previously. So this is the subject that's like 1,600 plus students. With this particular subject, it's an instructor uploaded subject. It's one of our first year accounting subject. What we do here is students submit PDF forms of their financial statements. And what we do is we upload them in bulk into Gradescope. as Matt mentioned previously, the initial setup time to ensure that the groupings of the answer is right, or on the right side of the page, you'll see sort of how many marks do you award for each individual, for the different groups of answer. That takes quite a bit of time to set up. But once all of that are set up, we are able to essentially instantly mark 1,600 paper all at once. So as we can see here, that 3,960 answer, essentially 847 of that answers are all confirmed and marked immediately. So different from sort of traditional way of us marking this question where the effort is quite consistent across every paper. This one is sort of chunked at the start. So we spend a lot more time at the start setting it up. But once it's all set up, it's just very, very efficient and easy for us to mark. How individual student feedback is managed. So we use this a lot for our exams, so final examination at the end of the semester. So feedback generally comes through exam review. So when students come in and view their paper. Through the marking process, because of the use of the rubric, a transparent rubric, it allows us to have a clearer outline of the marking process, and this enables a better feedback process. And mark breakdowns are a lot more transparent as well. And having done Gradescope exam review sessions, I think both Matt and I feel that it was easier for us to, when students ask for feedback for a particular mark, it was easier for us to explain how the mark was broken down, rather than in the past when all we see is summative mark on a particular question and it was marked like 2 months ago. Then it takes us a bit of time to provide that feedback. With Gradescope, that's a lot quicker. And from a rubric perspective, Gradescope also enables us to control what the student can see from a marking perspective, whether we actually want them to see the individual description of each individual points, or do we just want them to see sort of an aggregate mark for each of the sub-question. We know that Gradescope has a regrade request option that the students could use. So students could click into and request a regrade for their assessment. Within our institution, there is a formal policy around regrading and having their the exam reviewed. Therefore, for our assessment, generally this option is switched off, but that's because of the policy that we have within our institution. Next, I will pass it over back to Matt to talk about the next few slides.
I noticed this question was in the chat, and the question was, why or what's the student experience? For us in our own subject, the feedback from students had very little impact. We've had some students who actually complain a bit that they use of handwriting exams and they're not as fast in typing, but conversely, and probably in more than the majority nowadays, we've actually had quite a bit of feedback from students that they actually much prefer to type the exam than handwrite it. And even talking to students at a more wider level around the use of Gradescope, and particularly with the uploads in mathematical symbols, things like that, students actually found it quite easy and very similar to the previous paper-based exams. The only difference is their submission now is that photo at the end, which does bring rise to a little bit of an issue, is when setting an exam or assignment in Gradescope, particularly if you've got a bit of time pressure on, is actually consider how much students need to upload, how uploads occurring, are you do you want to do it question by question, have it within a online assignment format, or get them to upload the entire paper. And there's been a bit of, sometimes you just have to really consider about how much time is that going to take. And that can actually have a bit of consideration about bandwidth considerations. And one of the issues we currently have at Melbourne is with Australian borders closed, we've got students from all around the world sitting. And we know that for our students sitting in exam in China, who might be using a VPN to access the university network, that can take a bit longer to upload. And if we do a invigilated exam, say Zoom invigilation, that bandwidth is now being spread between the upload and the video camera. So it's going to take a bit longer. So there's one thing I will actually get you to consider. If you do actually want students uploading, just ask, and particularly from off campus, just think about how much time they may need to do the uploading, and that can be a bit of a pain point. But from a student's perspective in using, the feedback we've had has been extremely positive. And in terms of providing feedback, it's a really easy way to give students quite detailed feedback. Which brings me to the last point, this idea of analytics. Great, as we saw earlier, Gradescope actually provides quite a bit of analytics. You can break it down to question by question. I can go and look up what rubrics items were given for each question. So I get a real good breakdown on how students were actually receiving the marks. So in addition to the total marks, I also get a complete mark breakdown that X students did this point, X number of students did that point, etc. Which really, as me, and this is an exam, so we don't actually provide a lot of feedback, gives me a possibility, gives me the chance to actually reflect on students' performance. How well do my students do on a question? Is that what I expected? If it was a hard question, do the stats justify it? If it was an easy question, what went wrong? Which then helps me when I'm finalizing results to actually consider, okay, do I need to scale the exam? Do I need some kind of standardization? Or did the exam work as expected? Conversely, it also, because I've actually got that really detailed breakdown on how students were actually getting the marks, it gives me a chance to actually think back on, okay, how did I teach this point? Did I maybe miss something in class that I didn't explain as well as I should have? And what can I do in the future? So it's actually useful for me from a teaching pedagogical point of view to actually really reflect on how my students have performed down to quite a fine level of detail to then use that to inform my teaching going forward. But as I said at the start, I highly recommend Gradescope. I've had senior university professors talk about it's probably the best single ed tech I've used ever, just purely through the efficiencies it provides in grading in terms of both make much faster and much more consistent marking. And let's face it, grading's not one of our most favourite parts of the job, but Gradescope actually does make it bearable and a lot quicker than what it is on paper. Thank you very much, everyone.
Many thanks, Matt. And I just want to check. I know we've got moderators in the background responding to questions. So I'm just going to call it out there. Michael and team, are there any questions you want to throw out to any of the panelists? I do have one or two, but we'll see how we go with time. If there's anything coming from the attendees that we want to throw out to the panelists or the presenters, that would be great. Let me just have a quick look myself.
I think we're doing okay. There was a question about feedback from students, which was asked right at the time that Maggie and then Matt started talking about it. Thank you.
All right, perfect. Okay. In the absence of no questions from the floor, I have a question I wanted to, and this is just out of curiosity, basically out of curiosity. I know Matt and Maggie are from accounting, Karen, you're from IT. I'm just curious to know, besides your faculties, your schools, are there any other faculties within the school that are trialing Gradescope and what you've heard in terms of the experience with Gradescope?
I'm happy, as we showed, we know it's being used in the foreign languages, music department, us in accounting, our maths department, our economics department loves it, our finance department loves it. So from our point of view, it's pretty much being used across the university, and we are a big university and we teach pretty much everywhere. And so I also know medicine's using it. I heard about that story the other day. So I haven't yet found someone who's not, at least someone within a department who's not using it. So across the university.
Yeah, I think you mentioned the foreign languages and music. I'm just curious to see if there were more out there, but thanks for sharing that, Matt. Karen?
Yeah, I'd like to add to that actually what caught my eye about Gradescope is with the ability to allow students to do paperwork and yet do the grading and the feedback and all that process online. And for all those teaching engineering and mathematics and the sciences, this is priceless because as much as we want solving exercises or drawing diagrams or whatever, students do that still more naturally on paper. And so allowing for this to be managed online and still allow the students to do the work on paper is really where the strength is. And so, yes, all of our engineering faculty are excited about this. But we do have people from the business school using it. What else do we have there? Yeah.
Okay, thanks for sharing that. That's good to hear. I do have another curious question, and this is in regards to the assignment statistics. One of the things I'm very passionate about is how technology, EdTech in particular, supports how we rethink our courses, how we think our assessments. And for me, Gradescope's assignment statistics is a feature that just helped me see how we can do that in terms of a learning design. I come from a learning design background. So I'm curious to know, with the assignment statistics, there are two parts of the question. How do you feel students receive that level of statistics in terms of how they're doing, and how have you used this to inform how you redesign your courses, if you are?
Yeah, I'll start with one thing, and that is that I think a lot of faculty are often worried about introducing more tools because of students' reactions. My experience so far is that it's always the faculty members that are having a hard time with it. It's never the students. Students just take to technology far more naturally than we do. So that's usually not a barrier. And especially, I mean, I don't want to sound like a commercial, but the user interface in Gradescope is so easy and so natural. The learning curve is practically non-existent. You go on the tool and you figure out what needs to be done. It's so in that sense, getting used to it is not an issue at all. In terms of what else it enables us to do in class, I think really every time a new tool is introduced, some of us just map what it is that we're doing into the new tools, and some of us just try to think, okay, what else does that allow me to do now? And so even the online quizzes that I let them do before they come into class to make sure that they revise the materials, to me, that is such a big plus, because previously they just didn't revise the materials. Now they have to. So all sorts of things like that allow us to really rethink what we're doing and do it differently, doing better, ideally.
Maggie, any thoughts?
Yes. Problem is, I'm rethinking based on Kieran's presentation at the moment, and we were having Maggie and myself were having a side conversation while Kieran was doing. He's like, could we maybe swap from our other tool to Gradescope to do? And it's like, so yes, it does, but I need a bit more time to think about it. Maggie, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think in terms of like just your question, like two parts of the question, I think whether we provide the statistics that we currently have to the students, because we did this as final exam. So that statistics, I think it's just between us teaching staff at the moment, but we definitely use it to reflect upon sort of whether there's areas within the exam that students are not getting, or a particular connections between topics where there seems to be a gap that we could better build upon, or this might also, I think, inform whether we need to scale the exam depending on sort of where we are. And in the future, how do we make this connection more obvious within our course content? So it definitely informs us in terms of redesigning, or not necessarily fully redesign, but adjusting those course for future semester. But in terms of how we are currently using it, we don't share the statistics with the students.
All right, that's good to hear. These are, like I said, these are just my curious questions. Just to Matt's point, one of the things we're hoping to achieve this year and in future is to see how we can bring together academics and understand the different use cases for Gradescope. I'm hoping that our bigger dream is to have a communities of practice or user experience kind of meet up, where people can share, like Matt was just mentioning, that he's learned a lot from Carrot, and that means we're doing something right. So that was the angle I was going with, or with this conversation. For those, anyone on the call today who is looking to learn more about Gradescope, we have a Thursday weekly session with our professional educational services team. If you want to learn more about Gradescope, if you have questions that were not answered in today's session, feel free to join that session. I think that has been posted in the chat. Use the link to register for the session. The beauty of it is even if you don't attend the session, you do get you get the recordings and you can review that and also ask more questions. Our aim is to engage everyone on the learning journey. We know that learning is not just about the students, also about we as academics improving what we do. It is currently 2 o'clock Australian Eastern time. I think we're still Eastern time. I was thinking daylight savings, but I think we're still Eastern time. So if you're in anywhere around the Asia Pacific, hopefully 2 o'clock is not too late for you. So feel free to join that call. My last question is, before we jump off today's call, I want to say a big thank you to Karen, Maggie, and Matt for being here. But I have one more question. If there was anything you'd like to share with your peers who are considering Gradescope, what would that be? Just one word or phrases from each person before we round up today's session. I would say Maggie, go first.
Yeah, so in terms of, it'll be a similar comment that I've made in the previous webcast, but basically really know what you're trying to achieve in terms of Gradescope. Gradescope does offer a variety of format for different types of assessment, but really know what you're trying to achieve before you start sort of inputting all those questions into Gradescope, and what is the best way for your students to actually approach these assessments. So come back to your own sort of assessment design first, and then see how Gradescope could improve that.
Yeah, it goes back to the saying, pedagogy before technology. Thanks for sharing that, Maggie. Matt, over to you.
I take the opposite point of view. I take it from the point of view of an academic. I've got more time because simply just the amount of time I've saved by not doing paper shuffling. Maggie and myself probably estimated that in our recent exam period, we probably saved 3 days each just by not picking up paper, looking for the right page, putting down paper 400 times. And probably more than 400 times. We'll make multiple questions. And so it gives me back my life, gives me more of my life back from this hybrid job of grading. Simple as that. I've got more time to enjoy life and I'm spending less time grading.
It's all about that efficiency.
Yeah.
Love it. Thanks, Matt. Thanks for sharing. And finally, Karen.
First, using what Matt was talking about, I was going to say 30 to 40%. That's when we asked faculty, how much time does it save you off marking? 30 to 40% of marking time of a final exam is saved just by not having to use the physical script. So that I think is amazing. The other thing is that people tell me we're smiling when we're marking. You know how usually when you mark, you're like this? We're smiling when we mark, because it's almost a game, right? We're ticking the right boxes and we move on. It's so seamless. Yeah, just makes marking much less painful.
Excellent. So we're going to wrap it up on that note. We're smiling while you're marking. I've never heard any group of academics say that they love marking. If that's what we're doing, if that's what Gradescope is doing, that's a big win. I'd like to say a big thank you to everyone who's a part of the call today, wherever part of the world you're calling from, for joining the session. I hope you're safe. I know we're still navigating the pandemic. I hope you're safe, and we're wishing you all the best. Big thank you to our presenters, Madaki and Maggie from Melbourne Uni, and Associate Professor Karen Abnett from Singapore Institute of Technology. I want to say a big thank you to everyone who's been part of the production of these webcast series. Particularly, we also want to call out the Professional Educational Service team who have been with me on the call moderating the service or moderating the session today. Thank you again, everyone, and stay safe. I'll see you in our future webcast. We'll let you know once that goes out, and feel free to come back if you need to learn more about Gradescope. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.